So hello again, everyone, and welcome to the latest in our series of lockdown webcasts that we're bringing to you from Travel Weekly to connect you and to allow you to hear from some of the leaders of the travel industry as they navigate their way through this COVID-19 pandemic. And I'm delighted to say that we've been joined today by Bruce Poon, who is the founder, of course, of G Adventures. He's joining us today from Toronto. So thank you very much for sparing the time, Bruce.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
Well, I wanted to ask you, first of all, obviously, I know we're now entering in the UK, certainly it's our 6th week of lockdown. I wonder how it's been for you over in Canada, but also your business is, of course, a global operation. So I wondered how things have been similar or different in different markets. So perhaps you could just take us through how things have panned out for you.
We have customers from 100 countries, or for over 100 countries. I think we have people from 160 countries book trips with us every year. And then we have operations in 100 countries with employees. So it's been obviously quite complicated. I mean, the big areas in which we have a lot of people, it's been, very different. Governments, how they handled lockdown, how they handled, staff furloughs and things like that. I mean, the US has been very difficult in comparison. The UK has been very generous. Australia's been very generous. Canada's been quite good too. They're kind of somewhere in the middle there, but yeah, it's been complicated. But there's a lot of smaller markets, and Germany for us as well, we're dealing with. So. And then we have employees in a bunch of other smaller countries, and some have nothing and no programs, and some have legal kind of requirements for us to follow. And some were very early in giving us those requirements. Some we're still waiting for. There's different judgments and decisions to be made on policies around the world. So we're just following all of that. It's somewhat complicated, but I mean, it takes away. It doesn't take away from the overall escalation of this and how incredible that's been, and having to make some very difficult decisions early on, and then throughout the escalation, and then it's a wait. We're kind of in a wait and see pattern right now because I don't think any of us have seen the bottom yet. So it's hard to make any determination of what the future is going to hold for us. I mean, we all kind of have. Kind of an idea, or and we anticipate, but that's all we can do right now.
Okay, so just take us back a few weeks. Presumably, you had customers. You say they come from 160 different countries, but presumably you had some of them with you, traveling with you as borders were closing. The whole repatriation thing initially must have been some huge exercise for you.
It's still going on. We still have passengers that aren't home at the moment.
Really?
We absolutely do. Specifically, and it's very, very unusual, unpredictable countries like Peru, for instance, whose governments have locked down their borders for, in and out traffic. So that was one thing. I mean, we made the call, I think, very early in terms of canceling just till the end of April. I think we were one of the first companies that did it on the 13th of March.
Okay. Yeah.
And it's funny because we made that decision not based on because we based that decision strictly on customers in terms of the customer experience. And I was in that meeting that afternoon where we were getting reports that actually attractions locally weren't open. Like our customers who who want to go to museums or go to restaurants or go to different things couldn't get into what they went there to see.
So then you felt there was no point sending them.
Yeah, specifically, we were talking about a group that was in Japan and they couldn't do anything because everything locally was locked down. And I said, well, this doesn't make sense, regardless of what happens with this. And it wasn't a pandemic yet, but regardless of what happens, our customer, we can't deliver what we promised in terms of the customer experience. And so on that Friday, it was a tough decision, actually. But by Monday, Tuesday, it was the right decision. Like, things escalated, but Friday, the 13th, was quite early for us, but we decided it was the best thing to do. But then, that week, it seems like every day things started happening that I thought could never, ever happen. It was amazing. Like every day I said, there's no way a country can close its borders. Like, I mean, there's no way a country could say people can't come in or out.
But then it happened.
And then it happened. Then I said, there's no way airlines can just say, we're not flying to a whole, continent. And then it happened. I mean, things just kept happening that I never thought could ever happen. And then it just turned into a bad Will Smith movie. Like it was just it was like it
Yeah.
was like things were happening and people were stranded, and it became like a critical incident management kind of exercise more than
Yeah.
anything.
And were you all set? I mean, look, nobody was prepared for this. It's like you say, you didn't think it could ever happen, but how set up were you then to handle it? Because it's not just your customers then that are overseas. You've got, as you mentioned earlier, you have got employees in 100 different destinations around the world. A lot of
Hmm.
these destinations are inherently dependent on tourism. And
Yes.
I know some of them are projects as well that are,
Hmm.
specifically for G Adventures. So without G Adventures guests, they won't operate. So tell
Yeah.
us how it's been sort of in destination, that side of things, before we come back to the markets which you're sourcing customers from.
Yeah, well, I mean, there's two different categories for us, which is first being able to maintain our operations technology and remote wise globally, the network for us to
Yeah,
be able to communicate. So I think we get an A+ on that front. I mean, you can never be fully prepared, but we were pretty prepared because we've had like we had, I don't know if you would know in the UK, but we had this, remember that East Coast blackout in North America about a decade ago. We had the Explorer incident over 12 years ago. So we've, in terms of critical incident management and being prepared technology wise to suddenly go remote, I think we did very well, because we've always said, like, we got to prepare as if one day we come and the building's on fire and we have to be
yeah,
able to all be able to work from home. So we've always invested in everyone having laptops throughout the company, and being as mobile as possible, even internally. So I think we did well on that. Now, but operationally, and then in communication, I think we also do very well there, because we have technology, whether it's through Salesforce, we have something called G Nation, we have Slack, we have various communication tools
yeah,
that allow us to mobilize really quickly. But and I guess the other thing, we don't have, because we're not a public company or not a board, we could also be very decisive. I made that decision on that Friday where I just said, tours are canceled, and everyone could just run with it. So being decisive in that moment is really important. But I mean, the next thing for us is the manpower and the amount of people needed to be able to suddenly carry on our workload. And a company like ours, we're the largest in our sector, but still we're a very lean company. So the manpower needed to simultaneously deal with the customer side of what was happening, where customers were saying, we want our money back, or what's happening, our trips are canceled, and then having to deal on the other side with our own employees and what we were going to do, and also our finance side, because right now, we have, we're all going into hibernation as businesses, and it's about cash and tightening up all the looseness you have as an operation, because you're comfortable, and pulling all that stuff together really quickly to make decisions on on everything. And I think that was the harder part for us.
yeah.
And but we have a really great team, and everyone kind of pulled together. We were suddenly not in the same room, so, and we were communicating as best we can. But I think overall, I was pretty blown away by how we handled it, and how we were able to just mobilize as quickly as we did. But I mean, it certainly wasn't without its challenges.
Yeah, well, it's hard to make decisions really quickly. It's great that you did manage to make some swift decisions. I think in the UK, certainly one decision you made was, you had to furlough a number of staff, but you also made some redundant.
Hmm.
But actually, yesterday you announced in the UK that I think there were 7 members of staff that you'd actually brought back from redundancy and put them into the furlough scheme, which I think has obviously gone down well with them. So just talk us
Hmm.
through that. Was that just because you made a decision a little bit sooner than the furlough scheme being announced by the UK government, or how did that work out?
Yeah, I mean, there's never a right or a wrong way to handle these things,
Yeah,
and it's, and again, very difficult for us when these decisions are very, very difficult, and ones you don't take lightly. And I think with every company, we would probably all do the same thing, where as this was escalating, you have different phases in which you either are putting together, or you're and this escalated so quickly. It was, it was happening before phases were able to kind of be considered. So we had like a 1 to 5 phase, and so in terms of, depending how bad this gets, and there's so many things that can go wrong with something like this, whether it's how long it's going to be, how serious it's going to be, but certainly we didn't anticipate shutting down complete operation for months on end. So we made decisions very early and quickly when it started coming down that we were going to have to cancel tours, when we started getting requests for mass amounts of cancellations. And so we knew that there was an initial phase, which we took, again, I think to our credit and to our detriment. We are a very decisive business. So we made a decision very early on, and it was a global, it wasn't just the UK, it was a global first round of a combination of, and those were the first ones that we had made because they were terminations, actually, because we knew that we weren't going to be the same size on the other side of this. And we thought, in our best interest, and being that we should allow people to find other employment. But at the time, we didn't know we were going to go into, an apocalypse. We just thought there was going to be a delay, this could be a month, but we knew there was going to be effect in the business. So the first round was smaller, but still significant. And those positions were a lot of new positions, or positions that were, double positions, assistants of assistants, all of these things you kind of do when you're growing your business. But there's never a right time. So when that happened, we didn't know there was going to be furlough schemes. We didn't know that there was going to be any kind of help from any government, and we just assumed people would go on their, local unemployment insurance programs or do whatever you do. And it was just a regular layoff for us, which we've never had to do before, but we knew we had to take that decision, and we knew it was disingenuous for us to keep people if we knew they weren't going to be employed on the other side, because we knew we weren't going to be the same, and our business was significantly shrinking already, and so we were preparing for right sizing the business in that immediate minute. But then, of course, furlough schemes came out, and and then furlough schemes came out, and it seemed like some of the people, and and even our own people were saying, well, bring them back, and that's also quite complicated. It's not as easy as saying, okay, let's rehire them and put them on the furlough scheme. That we had to wait for the rules and the regulations for all of those things before we can make those decisions. So we got hammered on social media, and people say all kinds of things, and it's naive on how people think businesses are run, that we can just,
click a finger and reverse a decision.
Yeah, but I'm very confident that we always do the right thing as a business, and we do what we can, and we do our best, and I'm confident in that. And we, in this case, the rules are in our favor once they came out, and they're still shifting and changing, by the way.
Yeah, I know.
And we're able to help people out, and of course we will if we have that opportunity to do that.
Okay. Now, Bruce, you mentioned, or you described it as an apocalypse. I mean, it is really serious, and of course, like you also say, we don't know when we're going to come out. But you clearly are, as all operators are, they're trying to plan for coming out of this and for emerging from this. So, with your best estimates, how when are you thinking you might start to, or when are you looking at tours perhaps starting again? And are you thinking it will be a staged comeback, because presumably it will depend on when destinations open? So what's your thinking around the sort of coming out the other side?
Yeah, well, I mean, that's the $1 million question, first of all, and I think my opinion on this changes by the minute, depending if I turn on the TV and I see Donald Trump telling people to drink Clorox, and then I think, oh my gosh, we're all going to die.
Yeah, that wasn't his finest hour.
I would say, in this minute, I would say that our anticipation, first of all, what's impressive for us is we're still getting bookings. So we're still doing actually relatively well. And I actually stopped telling people that, because people actually don't believe the amount of business we're still getting.
This is 2021 bookings, or is there anything for the end of this year?
We're getting some for the end of this year, like Christmas and December, but most of it, a vast majority is certainly 2021.
Yeah.
So we're quite happy about that. And that's also separate from, you know, we're also getting a lot of rebookings, which is also a huge number in itself.
And sorry, just on that rebooking thing, on the cancellations, Bruce, did you, you know, what did you offer in the UK? Were you offering a full refund if people wanted it, or were you offering a refund credit note, or and how many people have you managed to rebook?
I mean, I think that number is also moving because we've canceled trips until the end of June, and we offered 110% future credit. So we for people to move on to other trips.
Yeah.
But anyways, getting back to the question, I mean, my anticipation is that we're going to start getting bookings in a series. Again, there's two sides to this: is when we're going to start actually getting bookings, and when that actually realizes into revenue is when we actually run trips. I mean, we're not like you know, mainstream type travel companies where people will book a week or two in advance. So when someone wants to go to Peru or Tibet or Mongolia, they don't say, I want to go next Thursday. They plan and it takes 3 or 4 months. So we think we're going to start getting bookings in a serious way outside of, you know, around September. We're hoping that we're in a reasonably fuller swing by the final quarter of this calendar year, like October, November, December. I think, and tours start running early next year. Like, I would love to see before spring, but I don't know how likely that is in terms of having, you know, starting our network up and running. But I think our challenge, I think what the travel industry is looking at and thinking about is a bit misguided in that, you know, we're worried about borders being closed and people, you know, being able to get into countries and us being able to bring employees back and put up operations. But I think our biggest challenge as an industry is getting people back on planes. Feeling safe to fly again. In close, you know, we've had, you know, it's the end of the innocence, if you will, in terms of just booking a flight carelessly and not thinking about viruses or germs or diseases being spread on planes. And I think that, you know, and so a lot of things are obviously being done now, and people, you know, like Emirates, I think are testing finger prick tests at time of check-in to make sure you don't have coronavirus. No middle seats, you know, whatever they decide to do, people wearing masks. But that's going to change, and I think and I think that's going to be slower coming back than I think people might think.
Yeah,
and
of course it has sorry, Bruce, I was going to say that all those things you mentioned would have a significant cost to them that would have to be put into the model. Yeah, so, you know, do you think that will end up in travel generally being more expensive?
Well, yes. I mean, that's going to be, I mean, if they take out middle seats, that's like a third of their capacity. So prices have to go up. But that might be offset with the price of oil, however, at the moment, and fuel for airplanes. But I think the bigger issue is it's going to take, I think, a very long time to get the whole airline network back up and running like it was before, to have the volume of flights. It's actually the volume of flights that's needed for the airlines to be able to compete with each other to bring down prices for the consumer, especially for tourism. Because we all know that the global network of flights is really set up for business travel first, and tourists are kind of in the back of the bus. So I mean, so for the global network of flights to get up to the speed where BA is doing 10 flights a day to Hong Kong again, and 10 flights a day to New York again. I don't know if that's the number, but I'm just saying, and fill all those landing slips at all the airports. I think that that's when you will see the prices come down. I think that airlines will be fairly aggressive on pricing to start, because they're going to want to get people to travel again. But I just don't think it's going to be the same. I think there's going to be positives and there's going to be negatives for the consumer.
Yeah. I mean, one of the things that I think people worry about is, sort of mass market tourism piled on a plane, all close together, maybe in a hotel. But I guess with your kind of travel, smaller group tours, often going to sort of remote areas, do you think that will sort of play into a new sort of health and safety conscious traveler, and the whole requirement that may come in around social distancing? I mean, how does social distancing work on an adventure tour?
I mean, my hope is that it does, but my fear is that, you know, people have very short memories, right? And certainly there'll be changes in the short term. I mean, in the short term, because I think until there's a vaccine or some form of cure, which you know, everyday news comes out that, you know, they're close or getting, to give people that 100% confidence, I think the memory of people is quite short.
Right.
That's my personal opinion, but it's in my best interest, because we run small group adventures, that people actually think more like that, and people do get off those resorts and cruise ships and actually think of different types of more connected local travel that in smaller groups. I mean, so I think there'll be an immediate impact ultimately, because I do think that I can't see how many people will want to put their, you know, 80-year-old parents on a cruise ship anytime soon. But at the same time, I think those industries, those businesses have a new challenge to prove to customers on what they're going to do to make things safe for them. And I think they will pull out all the stops. I mean, I think there'll be certification programs and nightly lockdowns at resorts that'll spray places to make sure they're sanitized and, you know, and clean all surfaces, and just make people feel reassured. I mean, necessity is the mother of invention. So I think we're going to see all kinds of innovative, groundbreaking ways. And I can hear the chirping going on in boardrooms all over the travel industry,
Yeah.
thinking of how we're going to, you know, use this opportunity to be better and stronger. And we're going to do things differently than everyone else. We're all having those meetings and, you know, using this unfortunate situation as an opportunity. But I think we will do something. And I think ultimately, once people feel confident to get back on a plane, they'll want to take a vacation.
Yeah.
But I don't think people will, I think certain industries, I don't think people will ever be as carefree again.
No. And do you
Yeah,
think people will be as confident to travel to sort of far? I mean, in the same way as your small group tours might be more appealing, a lot of them are to pretty remote, exotic, interesting places. And some commentators we've spoken to believe that when it comes back, people might just be a bit nervous about going too far, and they might be more comfortable to stay closer to home. And they were citing, you know, all the news reports of people being stuck in Lima. And as you said, you've still got people who aren't home. So those places that are perhaps harder to get to if another kind of lockdown or situation occurred might just be a bit off-putting to people. And that must worry you with your portfolio.
It does. I mean, I think that we're the best position for that, because I also think that that is also going to be an older demographic that's more concerned. So,
right, yeah.
And I think as an adventure company and people taking active holidays and the demographic, and even though we have over 60 passengers, the over 60 passengers that take our trips are fairly tough, we'll say, and fit and you know, want active holidays. So they're more likely to want to travel again. So I do think there's going to be a lot of that. And I also think there's a percentage of people that this has awakened, you know, fears that they might never recover. I think this lockdown and this fear that's been created, the fear has grown faster than the virus in many respects. And I think what hasn't been really discussed is the mental health issues that will exist beyond this. And for a percentage of people that were, you know, we all have friends that were, you know, borderline germaphobes. Well, that's like in overdrive right now, and and I don't think you know, there will be a certain group of people that might never come back from that.
Yeah. So when you're in your boardroom, Bruce, I mean, and your birds are, you know, tweeting away, and your ideas, because you're obviously an entrepreneur and an ideas man, you know, what kind of things are you thinking about it to change your business? I mean, I know we all know most businesses are going to have to be slightly scaled down, but we also know, as you said, that people are having to use this time to really take stock and tighten things up, or you know, think again about how they operate. So have you thought yet about ways that you might change or launch new things?
Oh gosh, yes. I mean, the big issue, and I know this is what's, you know, troubling customers the most, is, you know, the refund issues, where, you know, where as tour operators, the travel industry is a circular economy, you know, so you're paying a deposit for a tour, and we're executing on that tour to create these amazing experiences for people. And, you know, money's flowing to hotels and transportation companies and people to execute on that program. From the minute you deposit and say you want to do that tour, we start spending money, whether it's leaving deposits on hotels and transportation, arranging staff to run that tour in the future, having staff on the phones to answer all your questions, take your bookings. So we're all in the circular economy. And you know, we've all been very comfortable, especially us who've had, you know, 30 years of double-digit growth. You get a bit lazy, and in terms of, payment terms and, flexibility with all of your operators. So this money is just kind of circling around as people kind of make bookings and book trips. And then when it comes to a complete stop, there's panic because everyone kind of everyone kind of grabs their piece back.
Yes.
It's like a game of jacks, you kind of, everyone is grabbing everything back, and you suddenly realize that, you have to tighten all that up. And, and we all kind of are in those situations. And so then customers get frustrated and say, well, I want my money back because, and I had an exchange with someone on social media saying, I can't take this tour because of coronavirus and it's not my fault. Coronavirus is not my fault. And I replied back, well, it's not my fault either. I said, from the minute you leave a deposit, we're spending money to execute that trip, and I shouldn't pay for that either. I said, but we have to figure it out. I mean, this is just an unprecedented situation. There's no way anyone could have anticipated that things could come to a complete stop. And so
So when you say we need to tighten that up, do you think that the whole system of the way you pay your suppliers and your partners is going to have to change? Is that, and the way, where you put the customer's money when the money comes in, do you need to hold on to it rather than use that to start paying the people? Or
well, we do. So we have to legally, and again, this is also different in other countries, but we hold trust accounts where we hold that person's cash, but it's a circular, economy. But we still have to leave the deposits. And even though we have their money, where there is cash being used to leave deposits in advance for hotels and accommodations, and even though their money, and money is kept in trust, I mean, it's still, we have the ability to start leaving deposits to prepare for your trip.
Yeah.
Even though we don't spend it. So so all of those things, we obviously follow all legal guidelines in terms of holding money in trust, but we're allowed to release that money at certain periods when we are, holding and getting prepared to set up trips. So what I'm saying is that, there's all kind of payment terms that you can put on, certain businesses, but a company like ours, and with a lot of companies, we're working with very small scale operators. We're looking at very small hotels, very family run businesses, and we're trying to work with them to, to make their businesses successful. So we work with all types of levels of different family businesses and different operators that, some you give generous payment terms. We actually at times, we're often helping businesses by giving them advances on business funds to help them through business trying times, or they're expanding on their hotel, or they're adding more rooms. Or we have
it will ultimately help you. But
we have thousands of relationships. Like in the Galapagos, they need ship repairs. They don't have the money. We give them advances. All of these things happen daily, and there's thousands of them. And that's how you do business, and that's what people want us to do, to create these amazing experiences for people. And right now it's just unprecedented. So I mean, there's frustration, but I think that if we could just leave the anger behind and understand that there's just kindness needed on all parts to get through this, because we're dealing with people on the ground, that families on the ground equally, that that owe us money. Even agents are probably the biggest ones. So individual agents we deal with, that's not a problem. But we deal with big chains like Trailfinders and STA and Ensemble and Virtuoso, and our payment terms and how we get paid and how we reconcile payments is after travel with all of those. So we don't actually have your money on the day you travel, and we're extending credit to you. Yeah, and so we're also a credit facilitator in those cases, and that's tens of thousands and tens of millions of dollars that we put forward to make your trip happen for you. And that's just the way the business is. But all of that stuff we'll have to look into, because it's all works swimmingly, but no one has ever stopped and think, well, what if we, the zombie apocalypse actually happens, and everything kind of stops tomorrow, and here we are.
Okay, all right. So that'd be interesting to see how you work through that. I think you won't be the only operator looking at that at all. And as you say, I guess you'll have to take some guidance from different governments. Bruce, one of the things I wanted to ask you about was the through Planetera, the emergency grants that you've released money, haven't you, for some of your projects? Presumably because people were really, really desperate and you had to step in. Tell us about that.
Yeah, so we were just completing Project 100 for 100 community projects around the world. So I think we were at 90 actually, and we had 10 more to launch this year. And those projects have varying degrees of their dependence on tourism. Some of them are exclusively dependent, and some of them we work with just certain members of the community, whether it's just the women in the community or certain families in the community, and they might fare better in a downturn and be able to make it through. But that's a minority of the groups. There was, you know, a lot of our projects were, and you know, we went into these communities and these places a lot of times and promised to bring tours to, you know, tourists and groups to, and we didn't anticipate that it could stop. Everything could stop. So there's been challenges there for these communities. So we set up a relief fund, you know, impact into action, but it was a relief fund that we set up and to give grants to some of the communities, and we're looking individually at each one. So I think if you look at the Planetera Instagram or website, you'll see that, you know, every day we're releasing grants to assist the various communities where we can, and also setting up a couple other programs that are coming up, which we needed time to put all those together as well, because we have a lot of people screaming about us being able to do something as well, and it's not as easy as people think to just kind of get money and send it out to people, and there's got to be processes set up, and we've worked through all that. The Planetera one was much easier for us because we work with community leaders and we could work directly with community leaders. We have been, you know, involved in setting up these projects with them, so we were able to act quite quickly to come to supply, to give some relief where we can. Yeah, but it's been amazing because we've actually had a lot of contribution from our customers. Most of the money so far that's come has been through an appeal that we send out to our customers. It gives us a reason to communicate to our customers on a higher, you know, purpose other than travel, and that's what our brand is about. So it's been, I mean, that's been quite great to see. But I think we can still do better, and we can still do more, and we're about to do a few things in that area in the next couple of weeks.
Okay, well, we look forward to hearing about that. One last question I wanted to ask you really was around, I mean, you mentioned it yourself around the mental health side of this. I mean, I think, you know, as a leader of a business trying to navigate through something like this, which you've never had to deal with before. I know you've dealt with sort of smaller crises, but what's the pressure like as the leader of a business? And, you know, some people tend to thrive in a crisis, don't they? So they just come into their own, and but for some people it must be very big responsibility with all the staff and the customers. So how have you been dealing with that pressure, Bruce?
Yeah, I mean, the initial decisions, the initial difficult decisions, and escalating, you know, from you know, phase 1 to phase 4 in a matter of days, and seeing your 30 years of hard work of building culture and community just being torn to shreds is extremely emotionally difficult. But I mean, as a leader, you have to make these decisions, and people are actually more dependent on you to make those decisions and make them clearly and efficiently. And there's that line between what's best for the business and what's best for the people, and showing that you do right by everyone when you can. There's been many decisions, you know, we've had to make in terms of whether it's our, you know, all of our CEOs going on contract and paying out last minute bonuses, and, you know, and making, and, you know, our Inca Trail kind of porters offering support to their families. Making those small decisions is really critical to us. And, you know, I can't say and even those 7 people that you talked about, bringing them back on furlough, even though probably not as fast as they would have wanted, you know, doing everything that we can and making those decisions, as long as, you know, I can sleep at night and I know that in every case we made the right decision, that's the best that I can do. But then you move on to the leadership side where, you know, you're in this crisis and you want to make sure you take advantage of this crisis, because in any crisis in the history of time, even market downturn or crisis, you know, it creates opportunities at the same time. And there's great opportunity for us as a business. And so that leadership at some point has to kick in. And I get quite positive, actually. I mean, we've made those decisions. We've right-sized the business where we've cocooned. We're on ice, if you will, as a business. But now I'm actually quite positive and optimistic, because we know, you know, we're gonna make it on the other side of this. We've got all of our, you know, cash and everything lined up. We have the phases that we've kind of executed, and more phases if we have to. And now we are wait and see like everybody else, but I'm quite positive, and the leadership now is about keeping everyone motivated when you don't have access to them because everyone's at home.
Yeah.
So it's really challenging remote skills and remote leadership and inspiring people to be their best and do their best, you know, face on through a computer as opposed to
Yeah.
being able to speak to everyone directly. But I'm actually, I mean, I'm actually quite positive at the moment about the opportunities for us on the other side of this, because, you know, we're a startup again. I mean, I just said this in another interview. You know, this pandemic is in the travel industry. We're all at ground zero as businesses. Like, you know, Royal Caribbean and all these big companies, you know, Hilton or whatever it is, we're all at zero right now. And so the travel industry is now the world's biggest startup. Might be the biggest startup in history. It's a $10 trillion industry. And so we're all waiting to see who makes it on the other side, what the customer is going to want on this side, how we get to reimagine and re-envision our businesses on the other side. And for people who thrive as entrepreneurs, that's exciting. I mean, it's exciting for me. And the opportunities are great. Now, I wouldn't have wanted this to happen, of course. I'd have loved to just stay as we were. We were absolutely crushing it as a company up until the end of February. It was unbelievable how well we were doing. But, you know, and now it's about leadership and about, you know, getting us through to the other side and to the end of this, the finish line.
And you said your culture was crushed and all the rest of it, but I don't believe that for a second at G Adventures. I mean,
yeah, the people
even COVID-19 might, you know, change the culture, not just of, you know, your business, but of the travel industry, maybe society at large.
Yes. No, I actually believe that. I mean, we're definitely stronger and closer. I mean, it's less people. So, I mean, like, because we've had furloughs, we've had terminations, we're estimating what we're going to need on the other side. It's not going to be the same. We're not going to return to 100% strength for a very long time. How big are we going to be on the other side? 50%, 60%, 75%? Will we need that 50% of the staff? Like, it's those kind of decisions we have to make. But no, it's definitely united us. And one of the most emotional and most, you know, overwhelming things for me as part of this is the overwhelming responses that I've been getting from people and customers, to a point where actually I wrote a letter saying I can't respond anymore because and just getting letters of support from people. And the ones from customers are obviously you know, much appreciated and get you through those rough times. But the ones that are most touching are people that you've had to terminate, which I get daily letters from people saying, you know, that, you know, they just love their time, hope they can come back. It's been the best years of their lives. And that's been, you know, the reward and the toughest part. And so when you're asking about getting through these times and what you use, the different tools you have to kind of get you through, the overwhelming support that we've received from our customers and the culture of our business has been, you know, has really been fuel for me and fuel for the leadership team here when we've had to make these tough decisions. And through all of it, I think like last week we got you know, the best places to work awards came out. We got number 9, the highest ranking we've ever had. We've been in the top 15, top 20 forever.
You broke the top 10.
Yeah, we haven't. I think we were in the top 10. I think about 5 years ago or 6 years ago. So, but and so that's just, and so those kind of things as we hang on to and realize we're a great company. We're always been a great company, and I think how we've handled ourselves through this has also been great. I'm very proud of everyone within the organization, but we're going to also be able to come back stronger and be even better partners for people.
Yeah. And finally, the other silver lining, if you can say there is one from all this, is the environment. I mean, everyone's talking about how actually you know, the environment is currently benefiting because there's less carbon in the air and all the rest of it, but it might sort of improve the world that we want to carry on going to see. And there was some pressure, wasn't there, on the travel industry about over tourism? That was a big issue that we were coming up against. So is that something that you see as a potential silver lining?
I hope. I mean, it's my hope, Lucy. I mean, there's so much opportunity for us as a greater industry to rethink how we do everything.
Yeah.
But, you know, and we should be getting together and we should be more collaborative and, you know, people should be calling me more to actually say, like, what can we do? And it's the customers and the consumers have this opportunity to rethink everything, because once you stop doing ridiculous things, you realize you've been doing ridiculous things, right? When you're doing them, it's just fun. So you do ridiculous things, it's fun, but it's actually when you stop and you look back, oh my God, what did I do, right? And so now we just stop and we look back at our industry and realize the ridiculous things that we were doing were not sustainable. And I've been saying this for 30 years. I get up on stage with you, I don't know how many times a year. We run into each other all over the place. And I sound like a crazy man, but right now, as things come to a dead stop, we have this amazing opportunity to rethink everything and reinvent and innovate in every aspect of how we serve information and how we serve experiences to customers. But my fear is that we do nothing, and there's this fear and to fight to get back to normal again. And I just think that my hope is that all changes are made because of money, and so the money comes from customers. So my hope is that customers create that demand and shifts our industry, because our industry rarely shifts on its own accord. We don't just say, okay, we're going to do this because it's just a good thing to do.
Yeah, we're chasing the dollar.
It's the demand of the customer. The customer holds all the power, and the minute customers realize the power they have in purchase and just stop buying travel as a commodity, just getting the cheapest price, which drives travel agents, bonkers, where they don't care where they're going. They just want the cheapest price for a week. Once we get past that phase and create a demand, and realize how connected we are. I mean, if one thing this pandemic shows is how connected we are as a global community.
Yeah.
And if we have that, even the smallest impact on a small group of travelers, I think it'll make things not only better, it could be transformative for our industry.
Okay, well, what a brilliant place to end that on, Bruce. I really value your insight. I value your time today as well, because I know how busy you are. And we wish you all the best, and we look forward to seeing how G Adventures emerges, and we will obviously support you all we can. So thank you very much to Bruce from G Adventures.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.